See, one of the premise in which we wanted to build this policy is not to show too much of distinction in terms of basic regulation or other kinds of things between private and public institutions. They both have to meet certain criteria. I said about the 4 elements of the regulatory thing in the HECI. If you lay down those things on the regulatory and accreditation, it should not be different. This is one of the important things. So they, on one side, they come to enjoy, if they want to call it they enjoy the same status as the government aided institution regarding this kind of thing. The second aspect is areas like National Research Foundation. We have not made a distinction in terms of funding under the National Research Foundation, where you say only government-aided institution will get the benefit of funding for research and not the private. That also is not there. Then the third aspect is with respect to the kind of assets with them we're running short. For example, all the private institutions may not have many facilities, a good playground or some other kind of a thing. Some of these facilities which the public institutions possess, they can be shared under an agreement. There is no problem of public assets being shared by the private institution for this thing. And lastly, many other kinds of facilities, it will be worked out in a more greater detail, will facilitate the not so, the kind of, what it says is resources do not have the finances to change the system. Actually, one has to see that the changing the system doesn't mean, there are timelines that are there like 2035, 2040. The question is, what do you want to have a direction? How do you want to build it up? And how do you, where priorities has to be laid? I think there may be some basic requirements. And if these kind of institution can address those basic requirements, I think many elements of the policy which currently are exclusive to the governmental system, some of which we have identified explicitly as being applicable also for the private, could be also reconsidered in terms of even widening the scope of that kind of a thing. But it all depends on, because the general statement of this may be very difficult to respond to, because it all depends on what type of institution it is. And, the basic premise in which you run a higher education institution is that you have the minimal requirements to run it. If you start with the premise that you don't have the requirement, then the government will not be a party to build up the total capability. That obviously public money cannot be used. But public money can certainly be used to help them to improve the system. So the choice is between whether you want to improve the system, you want to add a few things, and you want to get the support of certain things, or whether you want to build the system itself with public this thing. This is a question which I don't want to get into at this stage, but I personally feel it may be more difficult if it is a question of building up an institute from one state of level of performance and capability to another state of performance and capability. But there are ways in which the new education policy can be adopted even by not so well endowed universities, provided they are very discreetly make choices of the way they want to run the institute or university and the scope they want to have. I certainly cannot today invest something for a small college and then say that in the next 10 years, I want to build a Stanford around it. It just is not the kind of thing that may work out. But certainly there is enough understanding and a sympathetic way to respond to it in the policy on areas where the sharing of resources is possible. And the sharing of resources is something which can be imaginatively done. And I think that should be explored.